Okay, if you get stuck today, say lie, and Helena will give you a prompt, okay?
May it please the court, Mr. Tempro, members of the jury. Up in smoke. Lois May Alcott, the victim in today's case, was the only person standing between Sydney Alcott Walden and over $2.7 million. Upon Lois May's refusal to sell the family homestead, Alcott Walden took action to save her multi-million-dollar prospects from going up in smoke. When Lois May died, Alcott Walden was finally free of the barriers between her and her money. You will hear today that Sydney Alcott Walden married into the Emerson family, who owned an 850-acre historic homestead valued at $5.5 million. Alcott Walden inherited 25% of that homestead from Alcott Walden's spouse and stood to inherit an additional 25% from Lois May for a total stake of $2.6 million if Lois was dead. The other 50% belonged to Ralph Emerson III, who is not interested in the property. You will hear today that Sydney Alcott Walden, as a realtor for the property, would also have received $165,000 commission. The only problem? As the preferred grandchild, Lois May was given a life estate over the property, and absolute control over selling. And she wouldn't sell, leaving Alcott Walden with nothing. You will hear today that Alcott Walden spent months trying to convince Lois May to sell off. She brought deal after deal to Lois May's attention, and time after time, Lois May said no. You will hear today that on October 15th, the night Lois May was murdered and the main house went up in smoke, Sydney Alcott Walden tried to convince Lois May to sell off for the last time. You will hear today that on that day, Sydney Alcott Walden will have to admit to going to the victim's house. And though she claims to only have knocked on Lois May's door, her timeline leaves a 10-minute window with no alibi. You will hear today from Jalen Whitman, who can testify that the defendant in today's case, Devin Emerson, loved her Aunt May and can testify to Devin's whereabouts on the day of the murder. You will also hear from Chief Hawthorne, who will tell you, what? You will also hear from Parker Putnam, who will tell you that the police department conducted an inadequate investigation. You will hear that the police department contaminated, lost, and failed to consider crucial pieces of evidence. You will also hear that because of extensive damage to the crime site, there is insufficient evidence for the prosecution to meet their burden of proof. You will also hear from our defendant in today's case, Devin Emerson. Miss Emerson will tell you that she loved her Aunt May and that she did not kill her. The prosecution bears the burden of proof in today's case, which means that if they fail to prove any one of the charges, for any one of the elements, for any one of the three charges, you must find Devin Emerson not guilty of that charge. But really, this case comes down to motive. Who had the most to gain from Lois May Alcott's death? Devin Emerson, who wouldn't inherit anything, or Sydney Alcott Walden, who stood to gain almost $3 million. You will hear today that Devin Emerson was nothing other than Sydney Alcott Walden's chosen scapegoat. There was nothing the only thing standing between Sydney Alcott Walden and her $3 million was Lois May Alcott. At the end of this trial, my co-counsel, Chloe O'Connor, will come before you and ask you to find Devin Emerson not guilty of arson, murder, and armed robbery. Thank you.
The prosecution will call